So we're going to start at my home base, and this is where I live and where I actually spend most of my time. I've got some greenhouses in the back which I can use as a nursery, also have tomatoes in them for summer crops. They are also growing winter crops and things like this on the shoulder seasons as well, so things like cold hardy greens and whatnot. And we've got on the back end, so on the left side here, this is the I've got composting areas, but this is the south of the plot. So my backyard faces directly south, so I get tons of light. I've got a balcony where I do some production, which I'll show you. In the carport, I've got walk-in coolers and some of my processing facilities, which we'll look at as well. But the story behind this place is actually was farming in the backyard before I moved in to rent the place, and then I eventually bought it. The owners lived next door, and they heard about what I was doing. They loved what I was doing, and so they actually they approached me if I wanted to use the backyard. They knew a friend of mine, and I said I'd love to, because it's a good sized backyard. It was when I had it without greenhouses. I think it was I had about 12 50-foot beds in there or something like that. So it was a big plot, and they asked me if I wanted to farm it, so I said yes. After a year of farming it, they asked if I wanted to move in and to rent it, and so I said I'd love to. So I moved in, rented it for a couple years, and then they said they wanted to sell it, and that was horrifying to me because I wasn't really eligible to get a mortgage, and I didn't really want to take a mortgage, to be honest with you. Actually, it was one of the last things I imagined I would have ever done. But I went through the process and eventually did get a mortgage. It was a nightmare to do. I had to go through about 5 different brokers, but I got the mortgage, started farming the place, moved into the place, been farming it ever since, and now it's our main base of operations. So we'll just kind of take you through what this site looks like. So this is sort of a work area. This is a washing table, and I can wash stuff on this table. We wash carrots on this table. I wash greens on this table. I like having the table because I can dump water into it, and all that water flows down to a tote that has a sub pump, and then that sub pump pumps that water out off my property. I actually just pump it onto my neighbor's trees. I'll just move it from place to place. Do the same thing with any perennial stuff I have around the site as well. So when I'm planting microgreens at that site, well, I'll actually go and move these microgreens inside the house, particularly in the shoulder season. I stack them on this nursery tray you're looking at here, this nursery shelving unit, and so they'll germinate in there, and then when it's the main season, I'll bring them outside and put them on my deck. You'll see that in a minute. But in the winter, I can actually grow them inside the house, and I also will do my nursery stuff inside the house. So going into my backyard here, you can see this area of microgreens. So I'm growing microgreens on my balcony. I produce about 50 flats a week, something like that. Sometimes more, sometimes a little bit less. But so I'm getting production off of every square inch. So you've got patty pan squash there. This is a soil mixing table that I used for making soil blocks. I do a lot of soil blocks, just the mini ones in the main season, because that's the kind of I grow a head lettuce called Salanova that is actually a cut and come again green. And so I find soil blocks are great for that because we're planting so many of them so often. So just kind of going around my house here. This is just a quick look at my BCS rototiller. This is a crucial piece of equipment for any small farmer. And I wouldn't really recommend getting into this for too long if you didn't have a BCS. I don't rototill that much anymore, but it's still good to have for turning over plots. Just going into this greenhouse here, got lots of tomato production happening. This is just a demonstration of the interplanting we do. So this is what it actually looked like here in the springtime as we were interplanting into the greenhouse while there was other greens in there. And we do a method of pruning called hard pruning, and we cover a lot of that in the course. But essentially what we're doing is pruning off every single branch beneath the last ripened set of fruit, and then pruning off all the suckers so that we twist them up these strings. And the sucker is the branch that is between a main leaf branch and the main stem. It will grow between. We prune all those off and twist the tomatoes up the plant. or up the twine. This is a look of some of the tomatoes we produce. And tomatoes have become a pretty major part of our production. And the thing is with tomatoes on the farm is that I'm just giving you a little look at some of the patty pan squash we have. Again, we're using every square inch that we possibly can to grow at my property here. But the thing with tomatoes that I like, especially when using the hard pruning technique, is I can interplant them and keep crops growing amongst them for quite a period of time. So there's very little time in my greenhouses that don't have production. They're pretty much producing something all the time. So just showing you here some more of their tomatoes. That's called a golden rave. All the tomatoes I grow on my farm are called indeterminate varieties. I don't grow any determinate varieties. So there's two types of tomatoes. Here's Roger displaying some of our hard pruning techniques. There's determinates and indeterminates. Indeterminates grow indeterminately, and determinates grow determinately, and they set all their fruit at once. So because I need to maximize how much production is coming off my farm, because we're only on 1/3 of an acre, this entire operation is 1/3 of an acre. You're going to see all the plots. We need to produce as much as we can. So I like an indeterminate tomato because it keeps fruiting over a period of time. This is an example of how the greenhouse is used as a nursery on the shoulder season. So I've got field crops beneath it, and I've got microgreens and also nursery stock on these rafters that hang from the ridgepole. They're just a T hanger, and I put 2x4s between them and some plywood in there as well, and I can hang my microgreens or my nursery crops on there. And the cool thing about this is that in the northern hemisphere here, as the sun is lower in the sky in the shoulder season, this actually doesn't shade out any of the crops. The crops get full light. By the time the sun comes higher in the sky, I'm not going to be using this anyways because it'll be too hot for the microgreens, and at that time we're also going to have our tomatoes in there as well. So just showing you how we're repurposing and stacking functions as often as we can. So just kind of going around the back of the property, you can see my compost bins there on the right. This is more patty pan squash and zucchinis. So these beds were bi-rotational. They were planted with cold hardy greens in the early part of the spring, and then once those crops would have been pulled out of the ground, we would have put the squash in there. Just showing you there an image of the zucchini and how we're often targeting smaller type of vegetables. I usually tell people, like, we're a small farm, we grow small veg. We're trying to get stuff that has a higher value. That is just an image of my one of my bike trailers. You've got another one on the left there, and we do a lot of our transportation by bike. In fact, we do most of it by bike as far as maintaining sites, harvesting sites. We're doing mostly everything with bikes and custom built trailers. These are steel frame built trailers. We have all that information about the kinds of trailers I use and whatnot in our course here. So I'm going to get on my bike and we're going to go and take a look at some other sites. On the way out here, I'm just going to show you some of my infrastructure that I have in the carport. So I've got 2 walk-in coolers there. On the left, that's a greens drying table, and that's a washing machine in there as well. And so when I wash greens, which isn't that often, but when I do, I'll wash them and I put them in these laundry bags, and then I will put the bag in the spinner, and it spins them dry, and then I can take the whole thing out and I dump it onto that greens drying screen, and that will get any like standing water off the greens. It actually really increases the shelf life of the product. So just looking at some of my walk-in coolers here, I have 2 coolers. I suppose I could have 1 big cooler, but I don't really have the space for it. In fact, I like having 2 so that I'm pretty much just running 1 all week during the season, and then I'll turn the other one on once we start harvesting. So usually I'll have product that just came right off the field in one of the coolers, and then once we start processing, washing, and packaging product, it'll go in the other cooler. So we're usually only using 2 for a few days of the week. The rest is just 1. Just showing you some of the tomatoes that we're growing here. I kind of sometimes after we've harvested tomatoes, I'll just put them above the coolers. They don't need to be refrigerated, and we're selling to chefs so often that tomatoes will never really sit for more than a day or two before they're sold anyways. I'm delivering to restaurants on Tuesdays and Fridays, and we have chefs picking up almost every single day of the week. That area there was just where we'll portion things for restaurants sometimes. And this is just a little sneak peek at my truck. Got some of our equipment in there. I've got my greens harvester there. That's a Jang seeder. That's my main seeding tool. And this is my no-till implement tool called a tilther. And it does till, actually. It just tills about the top inch of soil. So it's not actually disrupting the soil structure. And I found by using this tool, I've been able to do what's called a stale seed bedding technique, where I let all the weeds pre-emerge. And once I do that, I use tarps to smother those weeds, and I even use a tool called a flame weeder. And so I can kill all the weeds on the top layer of the soil. And once I'm in rotation in the main part of the season, I'm using this tilther to turn the beds over. And it's beautiful because it doesn't bring up new weed seeds. So my beds actually get less weedy through the course of the season. This other tool you're seeing here in the back of my truck is a quick greens harvester. It's an electric greens harvester. It's an incredible tool. With about 45 minutes of work, one person can harvest all the greens on our farm that normally took 2 people 4 hours to do. So 8 hours of labor down to 45 minutes of labor. It's a pretty amazing innovation. So just looking at my truck there. The truck we use for delivering to our restaurants that are further than downtown. Other than that, we're always doing our deliveries in the downtown core with our bike, which is the majority of the downtown restaurants. So my front yard is what I call a high rotation plot, and you can see that there's a lot of stuff that isn't planted or that actually was just planted, things that are being harvested. It's in a constant state of rotation, and this is what high rotation planting is. And so in our course, we outline how there's 2 types of plots for urban farmers. There's high rotation and there's bi-rotation. Anywhere on my farm will there be an area where there's just been 1 crop per season. There'll always be at least 2. And so the greenhouses are an example of a bi-rotation, and I'll actually take you to another bi-rotation plot as well. But everything else is high rotation, meaning that each bed on our entire farm or everything that's in high rotation will be planted at least 4 times and have 4 different crops in it per season. So we've that site is actually on a drip system, and the reason I have it on drip, I don't normally put my high rotation plots on drip because every time I want to turn the bed over, I have to move the drip. But the reason I have drip on this site is because it's a front yard and it's an odd shaped plot. I have had overhead irrigation on this plot before, but it waters the sidewalk and people get wet, and it's kind of a hassle. So I find with odd shaped plots like that, I'll often do drip. So I'm going to get on my bike here. I'm going to take you to my closest urban site, and I just speeded up the video here a little bit, but I want to play it through to show you how close this site is. So in our course, we talk about how it's important for multi-locational urban farmers to categorize their plots into high rotation and bi-rotation. So bi-rotation greenhouses are slightly different, but bi-rotation plots would be plots that are further away in the network, and plots that are high rotation you want to have close in your network because you're coming to them all the time. And so this here is an example of a high rotation plot, and this is an overhead map. I do all of my plot designs in a program called SketchUp. So at this site we have a plot here, a main plot that has 12 50-foot beds, and then we have 2 greenhouses that are about 36 feet long. The plot is only 50 feet wide, so I can't put the greenhouses all the way to the edge. It wouldn't be a very effective use of the space. And then we need to have some airflow. I can't go right up to that cedar hedge. So right now we've got tons of indeterminate hard pruned tomatoes in here. In these 2 greenhouses, opposed to the ones you saw earlier, we had the ones in my backyard were primarily cherries and smaller type tomatoes. We have all the larger type tomatoes here. So this is a high rotation plot. Each of these beds is turned over multiple times a season. Here I've just harvested and cropped out all the Salanova. And so you look at this picture here, this is what it looked like just about a week or 2 before I filmed this video. So, well, actually, this probably would have been a month or so before. This type of lettuce you're seeing up front is called Salanova, and it's a head lettuce. And it's an interesting variety because it grows from a core, and when it gets bigger, it doesn't make bigger leaves, it just grows more leaves. So we get tons of cuts. Each of these beds of lettuce here that you see, these are 50-foot beds, produced about $1,500 of lettuce. And they were cut about at minimum 3 times, some of them 4 times. So we'd cut them, and then you can see the one on the left was just cut, and it would regenerate in 10 to 14 days, and we cut it again. So we have this cycle of these beds. So this plot, which is high rotation, is in a constant state of rotation. You can see this is a shot here taken in the spring. And so you can see how even some of these beds were planted with early quick-growing crops before they went to lettuce. So each of these beds would be rotated 4 times in the season. So we've cropped it all out. This is often what a plot looks like in the mid to late summer. Is you just got so much stuff coming off and things grow so quickly that you're just replanting. So what's going to happen at this plot after is I'm going to replant it to a bunch of crops. Those crops will be ready in 21 days, and then I'll free that space up for my last planting, which will be things like overwintered crops or carrots, for a fall crop of carrots. This just give you a little sneak peek on how the irrigation works at this site. We have 8 zones at this site. There's one of them, actually 2 of them go to water this little lawn patch in the very front, which is under a tree, which I can't really farm anyways. And then the other 4 are going to the overhead system that is in the front with impact heads, and then the other 2 are going to the drip system in the back that waters the greenhouses with the tomatoes. So you can see here, I'm just pulling a weed there. This is arugula. This is a wild arugula. That will be cut and turned over very quickly. So it doesn't look like there's much here because everything was just pulled out, and so now it's going to get rotated. And so I'm often rotating between other plots, and you'll see as the next plot we go to how much stuff is growing there right now. So just giving you a little tour through our greenhouse here. Again, all indeterminate varieties, hard pruned, so we're pruning off everything on the bottom. This, I just filmed this a couple days ago, and so right now our farm is producing almost 600 pounds of tomatoes a week. And that's just between these 4 greenhouses you've seen here. The 2 that are here that we're looking at right now, and the 2 that are in my backyard, we're producing up to 600 pounds of tomatoes a week. It's pretty crazy the kind of production you can get with these hard pruning techniques. What you're looking at, that pile of lettuce that you saw back there, was actually we're not allowed to have a compost on this site. The landowner doesn't want me to compost here because they don't want it to smell. And so anyways, when we pull organic residue off the site, we actually have to lay it down and dry it out so that we can get it off site. So it's not ideal, but it's sort of a reality of when you're farming on other people's lots in the city. So just to demonstrate on the inside of this greenhouse that was all tomatoes that you just saw, you can see this is a demonstration of how I'm interplanting tomatoes overlapping our spring production in the spring. And so the tomatoes are planted just on the edge of the walkway, so there's still space to walk, but it is it is quite precarious and you have to be careful. But I'm producing a lot of stuff in here well before the tomatoes start fruiting. You can even see above me I have, hanging from the rafters, just like the picture at the other greenhouse, I have microgreens in here as well. So there's a lot of production coming out of these greenhouses on the shoulder seasons. So sometimes areas like there's beans on the right here, when there's not much else we can do, we'll just use this area to experiment. And so we're trying some different bean varieties there that we want to interplant at some other point. So I'm going to get on my bike here and we're going to haul around to the next site, which is actually going to be the furthest site in the network. And so this is what I'm calling a bi-rotation site. So again, a bi-rotation site is a place where only 2 successions of crops will occur in each bed in the season. So I'm taking you through this video to kind of show you the distance. It's about a 10-minute bike ride to get to this site. Of course, we're not going to sit through 10 minutes of video, but so when we get to this site, you'll see that a lot has been cropped out because this site is in transition right now. This plot here that you're looking at was all kale. But now at this point of the season, I can't really grow kale because we get too much aphid pressure. So I've done a little experiment, which I'll show you there in a second. But here's an overview of this site. So again, I do everything with SketchUp. You can see I have 3 segments of beds here. So the kale is on the top left. With this area in the center was all beets, and there's a bed of chard. That's been cropped out. And the area on the right, the third segment, was all beets as well, and it's been cropped out. And so now it's actually being replanted to some quick growing crops for the rest of the season, and then this plot will go to rest by about mid-October. So this is what I've done with my kale. This is a way of actually managing the pests. So aphid pressure gets so bad in the growing season, in the hot summer, that it's pretty gross. Like, you can keep growing your kale, it'll continue to grow, but it gets so caked in aphids that it's hard to manage. So I just prefer not to grow it because I have so many other crops coming off the field. If I don't have kale for a couple weeks, it's not a big deal. So what I do is I strip down all the branches on the plant, and we get those off-site. They actually will just go into the green bin for the city. And then I take a water sprayer, a sharp spray, and I go and I spray the entire plant right in the center of it where the new leaves come out, and all around it to remove any of the aphids, because they're a soft-bodied insect and they actually won't come back as strong as they would have been. So I've really decimated their population in a way. And so we're going to try and see if we get another harvest in a couple weeks. So what you're looking at here is my use of tarps. I tarp everything. If there's any soil that's going to lay fallow for a couple weeks as I wait to get a new crop in, I tarp it so that there's no weeds, and so I smother anything out. So what you're seeing in this plot is this was beets that we turned over. You can see my use of landscape fabric. I'm using landscape fabric on every single square inch of soil that's exposed so that there's no weeds. I'm not encouraging weeding, and that way I don't spend any time running a stirrup hoe or weeding at all. So what I've done here is I've planted 2 beds of radishes and 1 bed of turnips, and then I've covered the other one, which is what I'll plant next week. So when I come in here tomorrow, actually, I'm gonna plant this again. I'll peel off that clear layer of plastic. I might flame weed it if I need to, if a bunch of weeds have germinated, and then I'll plant it to radishes again. So that's a succession, and then the next succession I will plant onto the area that's to the right of it that's tarped. So I'll be succession planting this until about the first week of August, and then those crops will run their course. And then I'm not going to plant anything for the fall here because this is my furthest plot in the network. I really only have production happening here in the main part of the season. So just a couple images. This is what it looked like in the spring. Had kale, beets. You can see we're using this is a compostable biofilm, and this is the use of landscape fabric on that kale patch. So now I'm going to get back on my bike and just head down to one of our other high rotation plots. So again, the reason I want to have bi-rotation further away is because that plot that you just saw, I only want to go there once a week. Whereas all these other plots right now, I'm showing up to one of my other high rotation plots. This is only 3 blocks from the main site that we started from. So all the bi-rotation plots are going to be just visited once a week. So when we go there, we're usually just going to do everything at once. We'll do any maintenance we need to, harvesting and planting all at once, and then get out of there. And then primarily we're focusing on spending our time in the high rotation plots. And all of these sites here are visited multiple times a week. So again, you can see tarping strategies as we're turning areas over. This is an overview of the plot. The beds on the right, on the top right that are yellow, are new ones that I'm going to create, but I've had to build that soil up over time. So there's 2 segments here, 16 beds on the top and then 7 beds on the bottom right. And again, this is a high rotation site. Each of these beds is turned over multiple times per season. So this is what this little segment looked like in the spring, and then what it looks like now. So we're actually cropping out these carrots, which were the second crop in there. So we've got a lot of the Salanova lettuce in here, and this is, we pulled a lot of that lettuce that was at the second site we visited, and now we're getting into the production of lettuce on this site. So that's how we've staged our production here. So you can see even landscape fabric everywhere. This is about minimizing the tasks that don't pay. One of the things that we focus on in this course is showing you how the main things you want to be spending your time on are harvesting, planting, and marketing. Things like weeding and maintenance stuff, you want to do as little of that as possible, and you want to focus on the tasks that pay. So what's cool about this site is that this lawn patch here right now is the owners are actually letting me expand the farm into that. I've actually farmed this site for going on 6 years, and well, this is the 6th year at this site, and they had a small dog that died, and so they no longer need the lawn because these folks actually spend a lot of time out of town in the summer. So they're going to let me tear up that other chunk of the yard. So I'm going to get another 10, 25 foot by 30-inch beds out of there. And so that will be about another up to $10,000 of production that I can get out of this site. So a high rotation site like this can generate up to $30,000 of revenue in a 7-month growing season. And so I'm in Kelowna, BC, Canada. We have a winter here. We have at least a 4-month long winter. So we can have a lot of production going consistently, and a site like that can generate a lot of revenue. So I'm showing you this little in-between section because I want to show you how close this other high rotation site is in the chain. So this is just 2 blocks from the other site, and this is another plot where there's a lot of high activity going on. Again, this is high rotation, and all of these beds are turned over at least 4 times a season. So this is a very ideal plot because it faces south, and I've got a lot of stuff in here. Here's a little overview of this site. The shorter beds on this site I have on drip, and then the main section of the plot I have on overhead. And the reason I put those 3 beds on drip is because it's awkward to get even coverage with irrigation, so I just put that one on drip. You can see I've got Rime fabric or Agribon fabric connected to the fence here, and the reason for that is because the guy next door doesn't take care of his lawn very well, and he has an invasive weed in there called bindweed. And so this is a little experiment to see if this will halt that weed blowing into my yard. I hope it is. I mean, we'll see. But I'm often having to take precautions like this. You can see there's tarps all around this site. That's because I'm smothering out weedy areas, and then we'll landscape fabric them later. But so this is all high rotation stuff. The crops we grow on high rotation plots are called quick growing crops. So it's things like that bed on the right is a Tokyo turnip or Hakurei or a salad turnip, arugula, salad greens. We got more salanova there planted with landscape fabric, red Russian kale, radishes. Under the fabric there, actually, that's a carrot. This is going to be some summer carrots. And sometimes when I plant carrots in the summer, when it's really hot here, I cover them with Agribon because it actually helps them germinate better. And then once they emerge, I pull the Agribon off. So you can see landscape fabric all around, mulching all exposed soil that we can. This is a little snapshot of the irrigation at this site, very similar to the second one we visited. We've got 6 zones here, so there's 2 separate 4-zone timers, and that is running the overhead system, and 1 zone is running that drip system on the 3 beds. Whenever I build an irrigation system, I always have a faucet there, just so in the spring when I'm just planting a couple beds, I can use a hand watering for them. I don't have to run the whole system. So the irrigation is all connected to just your simple faucet off the house. And this has got to be one of the greatest advantages to being an urban farmer, is that water just comes off the house. There's good pressure. It's available year round in most cases. And it's easy to get happening. Whereas in a rural context with farming, setting up a irrigation system is often drilling wells, getting water from a creek or something like that. It's a lot more complicated and expensive, whereas in the city, it's very simple. So this is just a snapshot of what this plot looked like when everything was coming off this site. But now, once you plant out a site in succession, you're in a constant series of rotation with the beds. So there's stuff being harvested, stuff been just planted, stuff that's just coming up and might be ready in a week or so. So every plot is in a constant state of rotation. So we're going to head back to my house, and so basically, all of the 4 plots on my farm are within blocks of each other, and then the 1 bi-rotation plot was about a 10-minute bike ride away. But most of it is just in that basic setting. So we're back at home, and thanks for watching. We're going to take some questions from here, and Luke's going to show you, or before we take questions, Luke's going to show you a video on the Profitable Urban Farming course and give you a sense of what it's all about.